My name is Sarah. I'm 23 years old. I grew up in a small farming village in Iowa, surrounded by endless cornfields that stretched as far as the eye could see. It was a quiet place where everyone knew each other, and life moved at a slower pace. But there was one field we were told never to go near. I didn't believe it until I saw it myself. Our village was like any other rural community. We had a small general store, a school that doubled as our community center. Most families had been there for generations, working the land and passing down stories. One of those stories was about the cornfield at the edge of the village. The adults would whisper about it when they thought we couldn't hear. They said something lived in that field. Something tall, thin, and not human. As kids, we'd dare each other to go near it, but no one ever did. We'd laugh it off, calling it a silly old wives' tale. But there was always a hint of fear in our laughter. I remember the summer I turned 16. My cousin Jake was visiting from the city, and he thought all our small town superstitions were ridiculous. One evening, as the sun was setting and casting long shadows across the fields, Jake suggested we take a shortcut through that forbidden cornfield to get to the swimming hole on the other side. I hesitated, years of warnings echoing in my head, but Jake laughed, calling me a chicken. I didn't want to look scared in front of my city cousin, so I agreed. We slipped away from our parents and headed towards the field. As we approached, I felt a chill run down my spine. The corn seemed taller here, denser. The stalks swayed gently, even though there wasn't any wind. Jake didn't seem to notice, pushing ahead into the rows. I followed, trying to ignore the feeling of eyes on my back. We were about halfway through when it started. A rustling sound, like something moving through the corn. At first, I thought it was just us, our movements echoing in the stillness. But then, I realized it was coming from behind us. Jake heard it too. We stopped, listening. The rustling got closer. Then, between the rows of corn, I saw it. Something tall was standing there, watching us. It was hard to make out in the fading light, but I could see it was much taller than any person I'd ever seen. Its body was thin, almost skeletal, with limbs that seemed to long for its frame. For a moment, we all stood frozen, as staring at it, staring at us. Then Jake screamed, and we ran. We crashed through the corn, no longer caring about being quiet or taking a shortcut. All we wanted was to get out of that field. I could hear it behind us, moving through the corn. It wasn't running, but somehow it was keeping pace with us. Its movement was silent, no footsteps, just the sound of corn stalks parting. I didn't dare look back. We burst out of the field, gasping for air. Jake's face was pale, his eyes wide with fear. We didn't stop running until we reached my house, slamming the door behind us. My parents were confused, asking what had happened. We couldn't explain. How could we tell them that the old stories were true? That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound made me jump. Around midnight, I got up to get a glass of water. As I passed by the window, something made me look out towards our own cornfield. And there it was. Standing at the edge of our land was a tall, thin figure. It was perfectly still, just staring at the house. At my window, I froze, unable to move or call out. It stood there for what felt like hours, though it was probably only minutes. Then, slowly, it turned and walked back into the corn, disappearing from sight. I didn't sleep at all that night, or the next. For weeks, I'd see it out of the corner of my eye, always at the edge of the fields, always watching. Jake left the next day, pale and shaken. He never visited again. The adults in the village noticed our fear, but they didn't ask. They just nodded knowingly, as if we'd finally learned an important lesson. Life went on, but things were different now. I couldn't look at the cornfields the same way. Every rustle of wind through the stalks made me tense up. As the years passed, I tried to convince myself it had been a trick of the light, a figment of our imagination. But deep down, I knew the truth. There was something out there in the corn, something that didn't belong in our world. I left the village as soon as I could, moving to the city for college. But even now, years later, I can't shake the memory of that night. Sometimes, when I visit my parents, I'll catch a glimpse of something tall and thin at the edge of the field, and I know it's still there waiting. The thing in the cornfield wasn't just a legend. It wasn't just a story to scare kids into behaving. It was real, and it had followed me home. Even now, in my apartment in the city, far from any cornfields, I sometimes wake up in the middle of the night, and for a split second, I swear I can hear the rustle of corn stalks and see a tall, thin shadow watching me from the corner of the room. I don't know what it wants or why it chose me. All I know is that once you've seen it, you can never unsee it. It becomes a part of you, a constant presence in the back of your mind, a reminder that there are things in this world that we can't explain, things that defy our understanding of reality. So if you ever find yourself driving through the countryside, passing by endless fields of corn, remember my story. And whatever you do, don't stop, don't get out of your car, and never, ever walk into the corn, because you never know what might be waiting for you between those tall green stalks. Something ancient, something patient, something that's been waiting for someone just like you to wander into its domain. The cornfield may look peaceful, inviting even, but trust me, some fields are better left unharvested. Some secrets are better left buried, and some things are better left unseen, because once you've seen it, it will never leave you alone. It will follow you, haunt you, become a part of your world. And that's the true horror of the thing in the cornfield. It doesn't just scare you for a moment, it changes you forever. It makes you question everything you thought you knew about the world. And it leaves you with the terrifying knowledge that no matter how far you run, no matter where you hide, it will always be there, watching, waiting, ready to remind you that the line between our world and the unknown is thinner than we'd like to believe. So the next time you hear a strange rustling in the night, or see a tall shadow out of the corner of your eye, remember, it might not be your imagination. It might be the thing from the cornfield, come to pay you a visit. And once it finds you, it never truly leaves. My name is Ron. I'm 18 years old. I grew up in a small village on the edge of what we locals call the Screaming Woods. It's a dense forest that stretches for miles, and as long as I can remember, people have warned us kids to stay away, especially after dark. I never took those stories seriously. I mean, come on, Screaming Woods. It sounded like something out of a bad horror movie. But I found out the hard way why no one from our village goes there after sunset. It was just supposed to be a regular hike. I'd done it 100 times before, following the well-worn trails that wind through the outskirts of the forest. But that day, I don't know, maybe I was distracted or just feeling adventurous. Before I knew it, the familiar paths had given way to denser, darker woods. The canopy above grew thicker, blocking out more and more sunlight. I tried to retrace my steps, but nothing looked familiar anymore. As the afternoon wore on, a sick feeling settled in my stomach. I was lost, really lost. I tried not to panic, telling myself I'd find my way out if I just kept moving. But then the sun started to set, and the forest began to change. At first, it got quiet, too quiet. You know how woods are usually full of little noises, birds, insects, leaves rustling? All of that just stopped. It was like the whole forest was holding its breath, waiting for something. And then the screaming started. I've never heard anything like it before, and I hope I never do again. It wasn't human, not really. It was like something was trying to imitate a human scream, but getting it horribly wrong. Too high-pitched, too drawn out, with this weird, gurgling quality underneath. It made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I started running then, crashing through the underbrush, not caring about the branches whipping my face or the roots trying to trip me up. I just knew I had to get away from those sounds, but they seemed to be coming from everywhere, echoing through the trees, until I couldn't tell which direction was which. In my panic, I almost missed it at first. Strange symbols carved into the bark of the trees. They looked old, the edges worn smooth by time, but there was something wrong about them. They didn't look like any language I'd ever seen, just jagged lines and curves that hurt my eyes to look at for too long. I don't know how long I ran. It felt like hours. My lungs were burning, and my legs felt like lead. That's when I saw it, an old shack, barely visible through the trees. It was falling apart, the roof half caved in and the walls covered in moss. But it was the first sign of human presence I'd seen since getting lost, and I was desperate. I shouldn't have gone inside. God, I wish I hadn't. But I did. The door creaked open at my touch, and the smell hit me like a punch to the gut. It was musty and damp, with an underlying stench of decay that made me gag. As my eyes adjusted to the gloom, I saw piles of old clothes scattered across the floor. But it was what was mixed in with them that made my blood run cold. Bones. Human bones. The walls were covered in scratch marks, deep gouges in the wood, like something had been trying to claw its way out. Or maybe something else had been trying to get in. I backed away, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. That's when I heard it barking, faint but unmistakable. Search dogs. I've never moved so fast in my life. Scrambling out of that shack and towards the sound, I yelled until my voice was hoarse, waving my arms wildly when I finally saw the flashlight beams cutting through the darkness. The search party found me collapsed on the forest floor, babbling about screams and symbols and bones. They got me out of there, back to the safety of our village. My parents were frantic, hugging me so tight I could barely breathe. I tried to tell them what happened, but the words wouldn't come out right. How could I explain the inexplicable? For weeks afterward, I had nightmares. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, the echo of those inhuman screams ringing in my ears. My parents were worried sick, talking about therapy and moving away. I started to think maybe I had imagined it all, that getting lost had just messed with my head. But then, about a month after that night, I woke up one morning and went to get the mail, and there, scratched into the wood of our front door, was one of those symbols from the forest. Crude and hastily done, but unmistakable. The same jagged lines that had been carved into those trees. I haven't told anyone about it. Who would believe me? But I know now, with a certainty that chills me to my core, that whatever is out there in those woods, it followed me home, and I don't think it's done with me yet. Every night now, I lie awake, straining to hear any sound from outside. Was that just the wind or something else? Is that shadow by my window just a tree branch or something more sinister? I keep the curtains drawn tight and triple check the locks, but deep down, I know it won't matter. If it wants to get in, it will. Sometimes when the house is quiet and still, I swear I can hear it, that broken of key whistling, just like in the forest, but closer now, right outside my window, waiting. I don't know what to do. I can't sleep, can't eat. My parents are talking about sending me away, to stay with relatives in the city. Maybe that would help. Maybe if I get far enough away, it'll leave me alone. But part of me knows that's just wishful thinking. Whatever this thing is, it's patient. It can wait. So I sit here, night after night, writing this all down. Maybe if someone finds it, they'll understand. They'll know why I did what I had to do. Because I can't live like this anymore. Jumping at every shadow, flinching at every creak of the house settling. I'm going back to the woods tonight. Back to that shack. I don't know what I'll find there, but it has to be better than this constant fear. This feeling of being hunted in my own home. At least there, I'll face it on its own turf. Maybe I'll find answers. Maybe I'll find an end to all of this. If you're reading this, and I haven't come back, don't come looking for me. Stay away from the screaming woods. Don't make the same mistake I did. Because once it notices you, once it decides you're its prey, there's no escaping. Not really. The whistling is getting louder now. I think it's time. Wish me luck. And if you hear screaming in the woods tonight, don't come to investigate. It won't be me anymore. It'll be something else. Something wearing my voice like an ill-fitting suit. Remember, they call it the Screaming Woods for a reason. And now, I am going to become part of that reason. My name is Evan. I'm 28 years old, and I've always been fascinated by the stories my grandfather used to tell. Every summer, I'd visit my grandparents' countryside home, a sprawling property with acres of land and an old, mysterious well. My grandfather always said, "Don't go near the old well after dark. That's when he comes." I thought it was just an old man's story, until I heard the breathing. Growing up, those summer visits were the highlight of my year. The fresh country air, the endless fields to explore, and the sense of freedom that came with being away from the city. But there was always an undercurrent of unease, a whispered warning that echoed through the warm nights. The well, covered and abandoned, stood as a silent sentinel at the edge of the property. My grandfather's words were always there, hanging in the air like a fog. I remember the day I first saw the well. It was old, made of weathered stone, with a wooden cover that had seen better days. Moss and vines clung to its sides, as if nature itself was trying to reclaim it. During the day, it seemed harmless enough, just another relic of a bygone era. But as the sun set, casting long shadows across the land, the well took on a more sinister appearance. My grandfather's warnings became more frequent as I got older. "Evan," he'd say, his voice low and serious, "promise me you'll stay away from that well at night. No matter what you hear, no matter what you think you see, don't go near it." I'd nod, promising, but in my teenage mind, I couldn't help but wonder what could be so dangerous about an old well. It was during my last summer visit, just before I turned 18, that everything changed. My friends from the nearby town had convinced me to sneak out one night. We were going to have a bonfire in the woods, drink some stolen beers, and tell ghost stories. It seemed like the perfect way to end the summer. The night was warm, with a gentle breeze rustling through the trees. We laughed and joked as we made our way through the dark woods, flashlights bobbing in the darkness. I knew we were getting close to the edge of my grandparents' property, but I didn't think much of it. That is, until I heard it. At first, I thought it was just the wind, or maybe one of my friends playing a prank. But as we got closer to the clearing where the well stood, the sound became unmistakable. It was breathing, deep, laborious breathing, like someone struggling for air. My friends fell silent, their faces pale in the moonlight. "What is that?" one of them whispered. I shook my head, unable to speak. The breathing grew louder, seeming to come from the direction of the well. Against my better judgment, I took a step forward. My grandfather's warnings echoed in my head, but curiosity pushed me on. As we approached the well, our flashlights illuminated a figure hunched over its edge. It was a man, or at least, it had the shape of a man. But as our lights fell upon it, I realized with horror that where its face should have been, there was only smooth, featureless skin. No eyes, no nose, no mouth. Yet the breathing continued, raspy and urgent. For a moment, we all stood frozen, unable to process what we were seeing. Then, without warning, the thing's head snapped towards us. The breathing intensified, becoming a guttural growl that seemed to vibrate through the air. And then it moved. It didn't run or walk, it crawled. Its limbs bent at impossible angles as it scuttled across the ground towards us, moving with unnatural speed. The sound that came from it was no longer just breathing, but a mix of growls, clicks, and something that sounded horribly like laughter. We ran. I've never run so fast in my life. Branches whipped at my face. Roots threatened to trip me, but I didn't slow down. I could hear my friends screaming, hear the thing behind us, getting closer. The woods seemed endless, the darkness impenetrable. I don't know how long we ran, but eventually, we burst out of the tree line and onto the road. We didn't stop until we reached the safety of the town, collapsing on the sidewalk, gasping for air. The next morning, despite every instinct telling me to stay away, I went back to the well. In the harsh light of day, it looked as innocuous as ever, but the ground around it told a different story. Deep claw marks scored the earth, as if something had dragged itself away. The grass was flattened in a wide circle, and there was a faint, acrid smell in the air. When I told my grandfather what had happened, I expected him to be angry, to lecture me about disobeying him. Instead, he just looked tired and sad. "I hoped you'd never have to see it," he said quietly. I hoped it would stay away. I begged him to explain, to tell me what that thing was, why it was there. But he just shook his head. "Some things are better left unknown, Evan. Just remember what I've always told you. Never go near the well at night." That was the last summer I spent at my grandparents' house. As I grew older, the memory of that night faded, becoming hazy and dreamlike. Sometimes, I almost convinced myself it had been nothing more than a teenage prank gone wrong, a product of an overactive imagination and too much beer. But then I'd remember the claw marks in the earth, the smell of decay, and the sound of that breathing. And I'd know, deep in my bones, that what I saw that night was real. Years later, after my grandfather passed away, I inherited the old house. I thought about selling it, about never setting foot on that property again. But something held me back. Maybe it was a sense of duty, a need to keep watch over whatever lurked by that well. Or maybe it was just morbid curiosity. So here I am, back in the house where it all began. The well is still there, silent and waiting. Most nights, everything is quiet. But sometimes, when the moon is full and the wind is still, I hear it. That laborious breathing, drifting up from the darkness beyond my window. And I remember my grandfather's words echoing through the years. "Don't go near the old well after dark. That's when he comes. I don't know what waits out there in the night. I don't know if I'll ever understand what happened all those years ago. But I do know one thing. I'll never go near that well after dark." Some warnings are meant to be heeded. Some mysteries are better left unsolved. And sometimes the most terrifying things are those that remain in the shadows, just beyond our understanding.